What is up, YouTube? This is T-Quentin1 coming at you with another video, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Frankenstein, the classic horror novel originally published in 1818 and written by Mary Shelley. I set a challenge for myself this year to read one book that was over 100 years old every month, and in March, I did not meet that goal, sadly.
Failure!
I didn't read any books older than a century that month, but I did read one in April, and it was this one. Later this year, we'll finally be getting Guillermo del Toro's adaptation of the story, so to hold me over, I decided to revisit the book that started it all. When I was a kid, a big hay was always made about the fact that Frankenstein, the original sci-fi horror story, was written by a woman. But I think the far more interesting fact, and the one that stayed in my mind during my read of this novel, was that it was written by a teenager. Mary Shelley was 17 when she began writing this story, and you feel it. I mean that as a positive. In my last review, Jaws, I mentioned as a criticism how that book felt like the work of a young writer, but here Shelley's age really is the glue that holds the story together. The thing about being that young is every emotion is felt so much more intensely, and that's the case throughout the novel. Even small, seemingly insignificant supporting characters are given such raw emotional beats, and it sets it apart from a lot of the horror fiction I've read, especially of the era. There's a kind of heightened melodrama that defines so much of this book. I know saying like a Greek tragedy is such a cliche, but that's what this felt like. I love the atmosphere too. Most of you probably have at least a baseline familiarity with the story, but some of it just hits so much harder than I was ready for. Take the framing story about Captain Walton's Arctic voyage. It's really harrowing stuff. He could have easily been a throwaway character, but he cares about his crew, and the harsh conditions they are all forced to endure are well represented. But as for the tale of Victor and his creation, the true meat of this book, I'm reminded of a quote from Hereditary director Ari Aster. Back when he was promoting that movie, he said something along the lines of, "Horror is when tragedies happen in succession." And that's the essence of the horror in Frankenstein. Shelley does a great job of both making the stable, happy family life Victor has at the beginning feel genuine, but also the mourning that comes later. The book is a series of things being robbed from the good doctor. His family, his friends, his sanity. All of them are slowly taken away, and the result is an effective horror, albeit an exhausting one. Even at a not terribly long 240 pages, Frankenstein is a tough read at times, not just because of the early 1800s prose, although there were times when I needed to do a quick Google search. The word toilet used to mean something totally different, but because the character's pain is overwhelming as well. What makes it worse is that it's not all at once. There are moments where Shelley teases you with what appears to be light at the end of the tunnel and then snatches it away. It's heavy shit. As far as characterization goes, it also reflects the author's age. Victor's story is that of a good, loving person who makes one mistake and it ruins his life. Remember feeling like that when you were younger? Like every fuck-up would be the end of you, of your reputation? This also goes for his creature. You might be surprised it's far different from the old Karloff movie. There's a simplicity to the character in that film that isn't present here. The monster is intelligent, not at first, but eventually. And in my opinion, that makes him scarier. He's not some misunderstood child who only ever blunders into a murder. He's calculating. With that said, the monster is still, to a degree, sympathetic. People take such an instant dislike to him, sometimes it's hard not to feel bad for him. Again, like being an adolescent, you assume everyone's going to hate you if you say one wrong thing. We spend a lot more time with him than I was expecting also. This book is a bit of a double act between Victor and his monster, with both the doctor and his horrific creation going through intense trauma over the course of the narrative. That was interesting. I like that it flipped perspective so often to explore both the person inflicting terror and the one suffering it. Unfortunately, outside of those two, there's not much to the other characters. It's not that you don't feel it as these people are picked off one by one, but I wish we could get into their heads a little more. Also, it has the classic problem of once the second act wraps up and most of the pieces are laid on the board, you know exactly how the story is going to end. But you just kind of have to wait for the characters to figure that out. You might blame that on me going in already having some knowledge of the story, but in general, I think the plot is a bit ramshackle once all the central elements are introduced. Sometimes the odd structure will result in a flash of brilliance, like the already mentioned perspective hopping. Other times you find yourself wanting to skim to the end. but it's not a book about plot and structure. It's about character and theme. And as that, Frankenstein is a solid novel. It shows its age a bit, sure. And if you only gotta read one classic monster story, yeah, pick up Dracula, but this is still worth a look. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. This is T.1 signing out.